Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm coming at you with another video. And today I'm going to be discussing Hassan Whiteside and some potential trades for him that I've come up with myself that I think would be interesting to see and could potentially happen. So I just looked at, if you don't know, lately Hassan Whiteside has been shot by the Miami Heat because he's unhappy with the organization, they're unhappy with his production, and basically it's just a bad relationship right now, and they were trying to shop him a lot recently. They didn't find many options out there, but they are thinking that they want to trade him if at all possible. Hassan Whiteside, you could say it's arguably their best player on their team right now, the Miami Heat, but he's really fallen into this awkward category of player where he's very good at what he does, but what he does really isn't as valuable in the NBA anymore. I would lump him into a group with DeAndre Jordan, Dwight Howard, Clint Capella, Andre Drummond, all guys that, in 2004 could have been some of the best players in the league, but based on what they do right now, maybe for the most part really aren't even considered all-star caliber anymore. Andre Drummond was only a reserve all-star replacement after injuries this last year. Hassan Whiteside's never been an all-star. Dwight Howard put up really good numbers this year and was an all-star snub. DeAndre Jordan's a one-time all-star, and Clint Capella has never been an all-star. Yet all of them you could argue that those are the top 5 center, or you could argue that those are 5 of the top 7 centers in the NBA today. But so more specifically on Hassan, in the 2015-16 season, he averaged 14 points and 11 rebounds and around, I think it was 4 blocks a game. And then 2016-17, he had his best career year. He averaged 17 points a game and 14 rebounds and around 3 blocks a game. But then this year, he had an injury that held him out for a while, and his numbers dipped a bit, and he went back to averaging 14 and 11. Now, I think in the right situation, he could be a great player and be really productive and really help a team win a championship as maybe a third best player on a really good contender. But I feel like in his current situation, they're at best going to be a first-round playoff team, and they're not really using him the way he wants to be used. And so I've come up with some scenarios where I tried to find teams that were in need of a center, and I tried to find teams that would match his salary too. Because one of the biggest problems in this whole situation is that Hassan Whiteside has a huge contract. He's getting paid $25 million a year. So just bear in mind that in all these trades I've come up with, the salaries do match. And so it's not something where I think I'm just coming up with players randomly and I haven't even thought out the financial side of it. So all the money would work as far as the trades go, and I just had to try and come up with scenarios that I think teams would be interested in or would potentially do. So for the first trade I have, it's possibly or probably the most complex of any of the 5 that I came up with, and it's a 3-team trade involving the Atlanta Hawks and the Phoenix Suns. So the Atlanta Hawks have also been looking to trade Dennis Schroeder a lot, and the Heat don't really currently need a point guard that bad, as they have Goran Dragic. But for this scenario, I'm sort of looking at a complete Miami Heat rebuild, because I feel like they're caught in this awkward spot where it's like, do we want to win 44 games a year and be a first-round playoff team? Because that's sort of what they are right now, and they can't really get much better because they're giving a lot of players a lot of money, and they aren't really bad enough to tank either. So they're stuck in this middleman space where they can say they're a contender because they're making the playoffs, but they're really not all that good. But in this trade, they would basically do a complete rebuild, while the Hawks would get a bit better right now, and Phoenix is the 3rd team involved, and they would get a little bit better right now. So I'll give you the basic rundown. Essentially, the Heat send Goran Dragic and Hassan Whiteside both to the Hawks. So the Hawks are getting a lot of contract, but also 2 very good players to help their young core with Trae Young and John Collins. So after this trade, their starting lineup would look like probably Goran Dragic, Kent Bazemore, Taurean Prince, John Collins, Hassan Whiteside, with Trae Young as the sixth man. So yeah, the Hawks would get those two guys, Dragic and Whiteside. And then the Hawks would send Schroeder and Miles Plumlee to Phoenix, and also send Jeremy Lin to the Heat. So Phoenix would end up with Schroeder and Plumlee, and then Jeremy Lin would end up on the Heat because the Hawks would have way too many point guards otherwise. Kind of like they do right now. That's why they're trying to trade Schroeder. And then the Suns would give up T.J. Warren, a young, proven scorer in this league, getting 20 points a game last year, which is impressive. They give up T.J. Warren and Tyson Chandler. They'd be sending them to the Heat. So I'll just review quickly. The Heat would be getting Jeremy Lin, T.J. Warren, Tyson Chandler. The Hawks would be getting Whiteside and Dragic. And the Suns would be getting Schroeder and Plumlee. So why do I think the Suns would do this is that they get a lot of salary off their books, and they get a point guard that they really need in Dennis Schroeder. Why would the Hawks do this? They get Dragic, who is a really proven scorer in this league and an all-star, and they get a good defensive-minded center who can play really well and is familiar with Dragic too, so that'd be a good fit because they have a good chemistry. Also, that's a hole for the Hawks right now. They've been starting Dwayne Dedmon or Mike Muscala, and if they put Whiteside in there, he's a definite upgrade right away. And for the Heat, they don't get any great players. You know, T.J. Warren's okay, but I wondered maybe is his point total higher, maybe just because he was on a bad team last year. But either way, a guy that can score in Warren. And the big draw is that after this year, both, let's see here, Jeremy Lin and Tyson Chandler both have expiring contracts. That frees up $26 million in cap space for the Heat, which is something they desperately need since they are just strapped for cash lately and have given all their money to role players who don't really deserve it. That would be really helpful, and then they would get out from under Whiteside's contract. So that's really why I think that the Heat would want to do this deal, because they would get out of Whiteside's contract. They'd be able to properly hit the reset button, and they might get a bright future too. And also maybe you'd have to throw in some picks from, like a pick from Phoenix to make this deal work to give to the Heat, or maybe from the Hawks too. If whoever's picks the Heat wanted, you could throw in a first-round pick to the Heat from either Phoenix or Atlanta. Okay, so moving on from that, the next trade I have is just a two-team trade. And it is between the two former teams of LeBron James, which is interesting to say, which would be the Heat and the Cavaliers. And again, this sort of requires a team willing to do a rebuild, which would be the Cavaliers in this scenario. And the trade would be Kevin Love to the Heat for Hassan Whiteside and Justice Winslow. So for the Heat, this obviously makes sense in that they'd be getting a much better player in Kevin Love, and a guy that they could build around and have a lot more immediate success around, and potentially be a second-round playoff team instead of a first-round playoff team. And for the Cavs, I don't know that it makes a ton of sense, honestly. It'd be a definite push in the rebuild direction. They'd be getting Whiteside, who's a decent player, and they'd be getting Winslow, who has a lot of upside. But I think for right now, they'd be getting considerably worse. Also, Whiteside and Tristan Thompson couldn't really play together. You could try it, but it wouldn't go very well. You wouldn't have much spacing. But Justice Winslow is a guy who has a lot of untapped potential, and he'd sort of be the maybe the reason you do this trade. Miami could throw in a first-round pick as well, and that would even it out a lot more, I think. If they did that, the Cavs would have a bit more incentive because rebuilding teams really like to get draft picks because it has a lot of potential. But yeah, Justice Winslow is actually like the big incentive, I feel like, in this trade because of what he could eventually turn into. But also, Whiteside isn't terrible or anything. He puts up decent numbers, so maybe a fresh start would do him good too and would improve his play a lot. But yeah, so this one is if the Cavs were really willing to go all in on a rebuild, they would do this trade. Next one I got, number 3, is a trade between Miami and New Orleans. So as we all know, or if you don't know, here's an update. DeMarcus Cousins has left has left New Orleans. He is now a Warrior, which leaves a big void for them at center. Yes, they just signed Julius Randle at center, but to me, Julius Randle is a definitive power forward. And really what I would do is I would try and get a better defensive center in there. And Hassan Whiteside is that true 7-footer, a great rim protector that you could plug in next to AD, spare him of playing center, which I think he would have to do with Randle, and spare his body. Because a big reason that AD has gotten injured so much is that he really is a power forward, but with the lack of centers, quality centers that they've had on the Pelicans, he's been forced to play center, which is a rougher position. It has more wear and tear on your body. You're banging in the post more. You're going up against guys who are bigger than AD, so he gets roughed up more, and there's just more potential for injuries. So have you ever wondered why last season and the season before AD didn't have any terrible injuries? It's because he was playing next to a big center in DeMarcus Cousins who could take the brute of the physicality down low, and Anthony Davis could work more on the high post, even from the three-point range a bit more, expand his game. He could play more finesse. He didn't have to just be using his brute strength all the time, which he doesn't have a ton of because he's so wiry. So I, from that perspective, like this trade because Hassan Whiteside is super strong and super big and physical, and he's able to bang down low in the post and take a lot of that responsibility away from AD. This would be if the Heat are just totally looking for a rebuild too, by the way, because they would New Orleans would send Solomon Hill, Alexis Agensa, Darius Miller, and Frank Jackson to the Heat. And those guys are all nothing players. No, I don't think any of them would even play for the Heat. But if you look at all their contracts, everybody expires next year except for Frank Jackson, who's making $1 million a year. But if you look at the other guys, that is $20 million in cap space being freed up, which I think the Heat would like a lot, and that would give them a lot of financial flexibility. New Orleans could also throw in a first-round pick. This is probably the least likely trade I see happening just because I feel like it would be the Heat waving a white flag as for the next couple of years because they're honestly getting nothing of value in return. But maybe if they just don't want the headache of Whiteside anymore, they do this trade. Or if New Orleans has a good draft pick that they're willing to throw in, I think that they could do this. Also, I'm not sure that New Orleans would want to take on that big of a salary from, from Whiteside because it's so much money. But maybe they see what I see and they want to put a big guy next to AD to help ease the load of the brute down low. So this one is probably the least likely, but I thought it was just interesting because I think New Orleans could use a center, even with Julius Randle. All right, the next trade would be between the Miami Heat and the San Antonio Spurs, who, if you check out my other video that I posted today, just recently acquired DeMar DeRozan in a huge blockbuster trade. So go check out that video if you haven't already. But in this trade, the Spurs would be definitely upgrading at the center. Right now they have Pau Gasol as their main center, and while he's fine, he's 39, and I think they could definitely go for a younger upgrade. And I think that Hassan Whiteside is a definite upgrade over Pau Gasol. He's a defensive player, which Pau definitely isn't, and he can score a decent amount, which they wouldn't need him to score a ton with DeRozan and LaMarcus already on the team. So the trade would be Hassan Whiteside to the Spurs for Pau Gasol, Jakob Poeltl, who they just acquired today, Derek White, and Brandon Paul. The last two guys are just throw-ins and salary filler, and the first two guys are the main piece of the trade. Pau Gasol is also basically to just make the team the numbers work, but Jakob Poeltl is, I think, the big prize in this trade for the Heat. He could potentially flourish into a really good player, a starting caliber center in the NBA. I sort of see him in the mold of a Steven Adams. He's a little more finesse than Steven Adams, but I see him in that mold. Steven Adams, obviously, of the Oklahoma City Thunder. But this would also be a definitive sign that the Heat are going for a rebuild as well. So yeah, that's that one. I like it a decent amount. I think it would be really good for the Spurs. And the last trade I have would be with the Milwaukee Bucks because even though they just signed Brook Lopez, I really think that they need a quality center who's really good on defense. Thon Maker has just not developed whatsoever on that side of the ball, or on any side of the ball, actually. He was supposed to be the next KG a year ago, but he just has done nothing, really. He averaged around 4 points a game last year, and so I don't want to call him a bust yet, but I think that he really has to get things on track and start improving. But for the time being, you can't just waste away the Greek Freaks' prime years, so they need to build a contender now. And they can do that by getting Hassan Whiteside in there and trading Dellavedova and John Henson for him, and also 2 first-round picks I think that they would have to throw in as well, because those players aren't attractive enough to just do that trade straight up with players. So Milwaukee would have to give up 2 first-round picks, John Henson and Dellavedova, I think. Or maybe just 1 first-round pick, because 2 could be kind of heavy for just Hassan Whiteside. But the salaries match up fine. The Heat wouldn't be really getting anything good much in return. They'd probably start John Henson at center, and Dellavedova would probably be backup point guard and might not even play all that much if they have Tyler Johnson as backup point guard. But the salaries work. The Heat could again hit the reset button a bit more definitively. And actually, they wouldn't have to hit the reset because they'd have John Henson, who could probably give you about 10 points and 8 rebounds, which is close enough to Whiteside's totals that you're not losing a ton. So I don't think that they're getting that much worse by giving up Whiteside in this trade. But overall, guys, that's all the trades I had. What I really noticed from this particular player and his style of play and his contract is that it was very hard to come up with trades that I could actually realistically see happen. Even, I would say, you could say even 3 of these 5 trades were quite a stretch to imagine them actually happening. But I wanted to come up with some that would be possible and that I could logically in my head see where a team would be willing to do it. But yeah, I don't really see any of these happening. I ultimately see Whiteside staying on the Heat and riding it out. But any of these could happen, and I would like to see any of them happen because they'd be really interesting. And I'd like to see Whiteside on a team where he's happy and productive and putting up 17 and 14 again and 4 blocks a game, because he has a lot of talent. And I'd just really like to see him flourish on a team and be happy in a situation and see the Heat be happy, because I like the organization a lot. I like Spoelstra and Pat Riley a lot. But yeah, the hard part about coming up with these was that there was no quality player that the Heat were going to get in return, because honestly, Hassan Whiteside has the biggest contract for being such a low value player. You might say Chandler Parsons is the only other guy who's paid so high for what his value is, like how low his value is. But Whiteside is essentially getting paid about $20 million more than what Capella was paid last year to be the same level of player, which is stunning, really. His contract is just so huge, it's hard to find any good trades for him. But these were a few that I came up with. I hope you guys found them interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you agree or disagree with anything I said, I'd love to hear from you. And I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.